Hi, everyone. It's Maria, and welcome to the Breaking Up with Toxicity podcast. Thank you for being with me today. Each week, I will connect with people as they share relatable life experiences. We will talk about and at times challenge reoccurring unhealthy and toxic patterns that keep you from the changes you want to see as you break these unhealthy cycles. So let's get started and see where this show will take us today. Be sure to listen and don't forget to follow so that you never miss an episode. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Breaking Up with Toxicity. If this is your first time here, welcome. I'm really glad that you found your way to this space. And if you've been here before, welcome back. I do truly appreciate you continuing to show up for these conversations because these are not easy conversations, but they are actually necessary ones. I'm Maria Shkreli, a licensed mental health therapist, an author, and the host of this podcast. On this show, we talk about unhealthy patterns, toxic dynamics, dysfunction, and healing. But we do it in a way that is responsible, it's grounded, and it's actually honest. We do not turn psychology into clickbait. We do not throw out a narrative. We do not reduce complex human behavior into sound bites. And we do not diagnose people over the internet. Especially for the new listeners, I want to be very clear about something. This podcast is not about blaming. It's not about shaming. It is not about judging. And it is definitely not about handing out labels so that people can feel validated for a whole 5 minutes and then they're confused for like 5 years. This podcast is about clarity, responsibility, discernment, because those are the things that actually keep people safe. It's not fear. It's not the panic, and especially it's not misinformation. Today, I want to talk about something that I'm seeing constantly in my clinical work and in conversations with clients, and then especially all over social media. We are living in a time where words that were meant to protect people, words like abuse, toxicity, domestic violence, trauma, and even dysfunction, are being used so loosely that people no longer really know what the difference is. So, what is genuinely dangerous? What is actually unhealthy but changeable? What is uncomfortable but at times necessary? And what is simply part of learning how to grow? You know what? How about we call it what it is? Allowed to be human. And when people cannot tell the difference, they start making decisions based on fear instead of understanding. I cannot tell you how many times someone comes into therapy saying to me, I think I'm being abused. Actually, you know what? I think I'm a victim of domestic violence. And when we slow down the story, what they're actually talking about or describing is poor communication, unresolved childhood wounds, attachment insecurity, emotional immaturity, or, you know what? Just two people triggering each other without any skills. But because of what they're consuming online, everything now feels dangerous to them. And this is where social media has created a very serious problem. So what's happening is people are outsourcing discernment to people who are not trained to assess risk, okay? Or context, or even patterns all the time. They're only assumptions. And I'm going to say this in the most blunt way possible because sometimes sarcasm helps people wake up. We are going to the dentist for a broken foot. And people are okay with this. It's like the narcissist who has 1 million followers. That is just like, okay, explain it to me. Because a true narcissist will never be on the internet self-reflecting and helping other people. But people follow and they have these full engaged conversations with them. Or you take someone who's talking about if they don't respect you or if they're avoidant, you need to cut them off. No, we don't do things like that. That's not okay. I mean, sometimes it does, but there's no nuance here. So what's going on in social media is people are going to the wrong professional. It's wrong framework that's happening, and they're receiving the wrong treatment. And then everyone is so shocked. They're shocked when the pain doesn't go away, when the situation doesn't evolve into something better, or when they keep on repeating their same patterns or, getting worse. Let's start with dysfunction because this is where most relationships actually live. It's not uncommon. Dysfunction is actually unskilled behavior. It is not malicious. It's not about control, and it's not about people using coping strategies they learned a long time ago that no longer work. Here's one scenario. Say one partner grew up in a home where conflict meant chaos, right? So when emotions rise, they shut down completely. The other partner grew up in a home where being loud was the only way to be heard. So when they feel ignored, they actually escalate. So what happens is that they argue, they raise their voices, someone storms off, and nothing actually gets resolved. That is what dysfunction is, right there. I'm sure many people can relate to that, and it happens pretty often. Another scenario, let's say a couple avoids conflict entirely. They smile, they keep the peace, but resentment builds underneath. Then what happens is passive aggressive comments start showing up, emotional distance starts to grow. That is dysfunction too. It feels painful and it can damage intimacy, but if either person decides to speak up, the result would be discomfort. It's not fear, punishment, or any loss of freedom. This is where skills are missing. It's not about safety and it's not about control. Now let's talk about toxicity because this is where patterns do start to erode someone over time. Toxicity is not one bad moment, it's actually repetition. Here's an example. Let's say a person repeatedly expresses emotional needs and is consistently dismissed. They're told things like, oh, you're too sensitive, or they're told that they're overreacting. They're subtly made to feel like their feelings are actually inconvenient. So over time, they start shrinking, they stop bringing things up, they question their own reality. Okay. Here's another scenario. A partner uses guilt constantly all the time, not to control outright, but to get their way. After everything I do for you, I guess I'm just not that important. I wouldn't do this to you. That is actually toxic. And here's the nuance that social media skips, though, with this. A lot of toxic behaviors actually come from insecurity, anxiety, fear of abandonment, or emotional dependence. It is not intended to dominate. It still requires boundaries and accountability, and it still does cause harm, but it's not automatically abuse. And many of the times online, this is considered abuse. So, anyone were to share those scenarios online, you would hear you're in an abusive relationship. You need to leave. Now we're going to move into abuse. And this is where the line truly does change. Abuse is not about emotional pain alone. Abuse is actually about power and control. And here's what it looks like. So let's say a partner starts monitoring behavior, who you talk to, where you go, how you spend your money. Disagreements don't just lead to tension, they actually lead to punishment. And the punishment can be silence, threats, intimidation, or even emotional withdrawal that is destabilizing the relationship. So the other person starts modifying their behavior not to grow, but to survive. Now, this can happen with friends and it can also happen in the workplace. So the fear for this person becomes the regulator, and that is abuse. And now let's talk about domestic violence because this is where misinformation it is the most dangerous. Domestic violence is a specific form of abuse that occurs in an intimate or family relationship, and it involves cohesive control. And I want to slow this down. Domestic violence does not require physical violence. Most people think of that when they hear the word domestic violence. It does not require threats, or it does not require sexual coercion. Those things can be present, but they are not required. What is required is the loss of autonomy. Here's a scenario to help you understand what the loss of autonomy means. One partner controls the finances, decides who the other person can see, dictates how emotions are expressed, and responds to disagreement with destabilizing consequences. So the other person complies not because they agree or they want to. So the other person complies not because they agree, but because resisting feels very unsafe for them. That is domestic violence. And now let's talk about what social media almost never explains to us. Sometimes a person looks submissive, not because they're being controlled, but because they are terrified of conflict or have low self esteem, or they've actually learned growing up that keeping peace equals safety. In that case, if they spoke up, there might be discomfort, tension, or even an argument, but not punishment or loss of freedom. That is not domestic violence. That's an internal pattern that needs healing. This is the question I want people to start asking. What happens if this person stops complying? If the answer is fear or punishment, that is abuse or domestic violence. If the answer is discomfort or growth, that is not domestic violence. Now, the new kind of abuse, the misinformation as control, this is where social media becomes part of the problem. When people with no training speak with certainty, discourage nuance, and create fear based narratives, they undermine autonomy. People stop trusting themselves, they outsource judgment, and they start labeling themselves and others as abusers. And now most people are being told that they're dangerous when they're actually just being human at times. Always pay attention to the narrative that's being pushed out there. So let me bring this all together in a way that actually makes sense. Dysfunction is unskilled behavior, and that needs tools. Toxicity is repeated emotional harm, and that needs boundaries and accountability. Abuse is power and control, and that needs intervention. Domestic violence is coercive control that restricts autonomy, and that needs protection and safety planning. And misinformation, that needs to be challenged. This conversation isn't about minimizing harm, it's about protecting meaning. Because when everything is labeled abuse, real abuse becomes harder to see. And when everyone is labeled as an abuser, no one knows what danger actually looks like anymore. Remember, you do not go to the dentist for a broken foot, and you don't crowdsource safety from people who have no responsibility for the outcome. This is breaking up with toxicity, and sometimes the most toxic thing that we need to break up with is the narrative that's being pushed.